Each year, Washington State employees drive millions of miles in the performance of their duties. For some state employees, driving may constitute a large portion of their workday. Hello, I'm Governor Chris Gregoire. I'd like to remind you that whether your job requires travel across town, to the other side of the state, or over rugged off-road areas, arriving safely at your destination should always be your top priority. Make safe driving habits your state of mind and help promote safety on the highways of Washington State. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Johnny Alexander with the Washington State Patrol. As a state employee, you may find that driving is an essential part of your work. Your job may require you to drive to meetings or to work sites, use specialty vehicles, or even transport a group of your coworkers to another destination. Regardless of the type of driving you do, when you're behind the wheel, your primary responsibility is getting to your destination safely. While this may sound simple, everyday distractions and conditions can make driving a challenge.
I had the opportunity to both drive professionally and be an instructor prior to moving and taking a job out here in the state of Washington. On the particular day where I had an accident while driving a Washington State vehicle, I had actually conducted a training course where we had started early in the day, driven up to an area north of Seattle. On Friday during rush hour, left Seattle to return back to our home in Olympia. The traffic was stop and go, and I had another coworker with me who suggested that since there were two of us, we might want to move over to get into the HOV lane. I was in the right-hand lane, and as you can imagine, people weren't real gracious about wanting to let you in because they were anxious to get to where they were going and didn't want to delay their progress. So had my blinker on, was able to move from the right lane to the center lane, and then eventually I was able to get over and move from the center lane to the left lane, but not the HOV lane. That's a little more care needed to switch and get into that lane because sometimes people will be going full speed limit and you're going from acceleration at 0 to try and get into that line. So as you can imagine, I'm checking the rear view mirror, the side view mirrors, and trying to see if I can get over into that left lane while trying to monitor the traffic in front of me. As I took my eyes off the side mirror to check the HOV lane, the car from the right-hand lane moved in front of the Blazer in front of me, which shortened the stopping distance. So as I brought my eyes back, I didn't have the distance that I thought I had. There's a real sense of feeling helpless when you realize you're going to hit another vehicle and there's nothing you can do about that. I mean, I stood on the pedal as hard as I could, but I did not have the distance to stop.
In the morning of March the 6th, the year 2000, I left here in Puyallup, where my office is, for a meeting in Moses Lake, and picked up a colleague along the way, and then stopped at North Bend and picked up two more colleagues. And it had been snowing all morning long, and we had left Puyallup about 5:30 in the morning, and it could just continue to snow and to snow. And probably the most reasonable person would have said, no meeting is important enough to keep going, but of course, I kept going because, like most state employees, dedicated to getting the job done. It was a statewide meeting. There was no way to notify people we weren't coming. And it was one of those things where I just felt an obligation to keep going. And we arrived in Ellensburg and crossed the pass and everything, Snoqualmie Pass, safely, and kind of felt, whew, good, it's over, you know, it'll get better from here. And we'd stopped in Ellensburg, gotten breakfast, had just gotten back in the car, gotten back out on the road, and we're now heading towards Vantage. And I had just uttered the words that said, gee, the road is just getting better, and I went into a skid. There's a very deep ravine to the right, and I was trying to steer away from that, thinking that will kill us. And in the process of doing that, fishtailed back and forth across the road. Eventually, the car rolled 1.5 times and then skidded on the top. And we all were wearing our seatbelts. Amazingly enough, no one was killed. But the very worst thing for me was the thought that I could very easily have killed 3 very dear colleagues in the car with me.
I was at work and I had a meeting to go to in a different section of Lacey. And so I left my office on Martin Way and was driving to row 6. I got to about where you turn off to go to Ecology and where Top Foods is, and that's the last I remember. The next thing I knew, it was 10 days later at the hospital up in Seattle. And they'd already amputated my leg, and they'd done several surgeries. When I was out for 10 days, they had medically kept me under while they did a whole bunch of procedures. I learned after I woke up at the hospital that an 80-year-old man had collapsed behind the wheel and lost control of his vehicle and hit me head on. And he was doing about 35 miles an hour also, so neither one of us were driving fast. We were on an artery in town. I was feeling really good, and in a blink, my life changed. We were both airlifted to Harborview. The other driver, he passed away.
Obviously, driving can often be challenging, and accidents life-changing and tragic and often out of our control. But there are some steps we can take to help us drive safer, like minimizing distractions. Distractions like cell phones and conversations don't help, and can even make the simplest trip into an accident waiting to happen. Research supports this.
National studies have shown that almost 1 out of 10 fatality crashes involve some driver distraction. And then about 20 to 30% of crashes all over our country involve some driver distraction. I've been involved with federal crash injury research studies for about 15 years now, and I've interviewed thousands of drivers involved in crashes. And a lot of times these drivers just don't even know what happened and what hit them, and then before they know it, they show up in a trauma center and they have these injuries. And that's why it's real important that we spend 100% of our attention on the driving task, because there may be a chance for you to avoid a collision and actually prevent the injuries to you and your occupants. You have to understand that when you're going 30 or 35 miles an hour, your vehicle is traveling 44 feet, maybe 50 feet per second. So that 1 second of distraction that you take your eyes off the road could be the distance you're going to need to brake your car to avoid a situation. There's 4 different types of distractions that occur while you're driving a vehicle. The first is just something visual, so maybe another crash outside the car and you're just kind of looking over at it, or anything that would take your eyes off the road. The second is just something auditory, like a sound, and it could be even just a cell phone going off in your car and you turn down to look at the phone, or just outside of the vehicle there could be a sound or explosion or another crash, and it just takes your eyes off the road and you turn just for a second, and that could be the chance that you might need to avoid another crash. The third is just the biomechanical kind of distractions, where you might be reaching for something in your vehicle or reaching into your bag, but just basically you're taking your attention away from the driving. Even if it's 1 or 2 seconds, that means your vehicle has traveled some distance on the roadway, and that may be the distance you're going to need to brake the car.